Welcome to Fears Forged. Hello, I am Fears Forged. I am here to help you sleep. But be warned, tonight's tale will take you deep into the shadows of the past, where reality and nightmare blur. If you enjoy these unsettling stories, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now, settle in, turn down the lights, and let the fear take hold. The Vanishing of David Lang. In 1880, on the outskirts of Gallatin, Tennessee, a well-known farmer named David Lang vanished, not just disappeared, but vanished into thin air in front of witnesses. His story remains one of the strangest and most unsettling mysteries in American history, an event that defies explanation and still haunts the land where it occurred. The afternoon sun bathed the rolling fields of Lang's property in golden light as his wife, Emma, and their 2 children played near the house. Across the field, a horse-drawn carriage approached, carrying Judge August Peck, a longtime friend of the Lang family, along with his driver. The judge raised a hand in greeting as David Lang stepped out onto the field, walking toward them, and then he was gone. No sound, no cry, no struggle. One moment, David Lang was there. The next, he simply ceased to exist. Emma's scream shattered the silence. She ran to the spot where her husband had stood just moments ago, clawing at the grass, searching for any trace of him. The judge and his driver, both stunned into speechlessness, hurried over, scanning the empty landscape. The ground beneath them was solid, no holes, no disturbances, nothing to explain how a full-grown man could just vanish. Word spread quickly, and soon, the townspeople arrived to search. They scoured every inch of land, probing the soil, checking the barn, the house, even the well, but David Lang was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, then months. No body, no evidence, just an empty space where a man had once stood. But the story did not end there. As autumn set in, Emma and the children noticed something unnatural about the field where David had disappeared. The grass in that spot had died, forming a perfect, lifeless circle. No weeds grew there, no insects crawled over it. Even animals refused to step into the space, skirting it as though sensing something unseen. And then the voices began. On quiet nights, when the wind was still, Emma claimed she could hear David's voice calling out, weak, distant, pleading. The children heard it too, whispering through the trees, a soft, unearthly cry for help. Desperate, Emma brought in a team of psychics and spiritualists. They held essences, chanted prayers, even burned incense over the dead grass. But nothing worked. The voices remained, growing weaker, fading with each passing year, until they stopped altogether. Decades later, in the early 1900s, the Lang farm had long since changed hands, the legend of David Lang fading into local folklore. But one night, a traveling salesman passing through the area decided to camp near the old field. As he lay under the stars, staring at the empty space where nothing had grown in over 20 years, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The silence around him was unnatural, too deep, too absolute. And then he saw it. A single footprint pressed into the dry, cracked earth, appearing right before his eyes. He ran, abandoning his belongings, never to return. The next morning, the new owner of the land found his campsite empty, save for a single indentation in the dirt, exactly where David Lang had disappeared all those years ago. To this day, no one knows what truly happened to David Lang. Some claim he fell through a natural sinkhole that later closed up, but that doesn't explain the lack of disturbance in the soil. Others whisper of a time slip, a tear in reality that swallowed him whole. But those who have stood in the dead circle, those who have felt the unnatural cold that lingers there, believe something far more terrifying, that David Lang never left. He is still there, unseen, trapped between worlds, reaching out through time, searching for a way home. And sometimes, on still nights, when the wind is just right, you can still hear him calling. Story number 2. The Night Marches of Hawaii. The islands of Hawaii are known for their breathtaking beauty, emerald cliffs, volcanic craters, and endless stretches of ocean. But beneath the paradise lies something far older, something that refuses to be forgotten. For centuries, locals have spoken of the night marchers, ghostly warriors doomed to roam the land, forever retracing their ancient paths. Their presence is said to bring death, their gaze a curse from which there is no escape. And for those unfortunate enough to cross their path, there is only one way to survive. This is the story of a man who did not listen. It was in the summer of 1993 that Mark Holloway, a history professor from California, arrived on the big island of Hawaii. He had spent years studying Polynesian cultures, fascinated by their myths and legends. When he heard the stories of the night marchers, he dismissed them as mere folklore, the kind of tales designed to frighten children. Then he learned about the Forbidden Trail, a narrow, winding path deep in the jungle, said to be an ancient procession route used by Hawaiian warriors centuries ago. The locals warned him to stay away, not out of superstition, but out of fear. Mark laughed. A historian doesn't fear stories. So one evening, just before sunset, he set out alone, a flashlight in his bag, a notebook in his hand. What he found would never be written down. The jungle swallowed him whole. The trees grew taller, their thick canopies blocking out the last traces of daylight. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves. And then the drums began. Faint at first, a distant rhythm carried by the wind. Then louder, steady, unyielding. Mark stopped, heart pounding. It was impossible. There was no festival, no ceremony happening in this part of the island. He was miles from the nearest village. Yet the drumming grew closer. And then he saw them. They came in a straight line, emerging from the darkness like shadows brought to life. Dozens of warriors, bare-chested, adorned in traditional Hawaiian kapa cloaks, their faces grim and eyes burning with an unnatural glow. They carried torches, their flickering flames casting eerie shapes against the trees. Some bore spears, others conch shells, and at the front, a towering figure with a helmet of woven leaves, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. His breath hitched as he remembered the warnings. You must never look directly at them. You must never stand in their path. Panicked, he turned to run, but his legs refused to move. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of salt and blood. The drumming filled his chest, his bones, his mind, forcing him to his knees. He could feel them watching, and then, in the flickering torchlight, Mark saw the truth. The ground beneath the warriors' feet did not disturb. Their torches cast no shadows. The trees around them did not sway with their passing. These were not men. They were something else. Tears streamed down Mark's face as he remembered the final rule. The only way to survive an encounter with the night marchers was to show respect, to lower yourself to the ground and avert your gaze. With trembling hands, he pressed his forehead to the dirt, whispering the words he had read in ancient texts. Ikela mai, ike puna, ki hu orohe au. Forgive me, ancestors. I am listening. The drumming slowed. The heat of the torches faded. The presence loomed over him silent, judging. Then footsteps passed by his trembling form. One by one, the warriors continued their march, their procession stretching endlessly into the dark. When Mark finally dared to lift his head, they were gone. He stumbled out of the jungle at dawn, his clothes soaked with sweat, his body aching as though he had been trampled. But there was something else. A single bloody handprint was pressed against his shoulder. No wound beneath it. No pain. Just a mark that would never wash away. Mark Holloway left Hawaii that same week. He never wrote about what happened. Never told the world about the truth of the night marchers. but those who saw him after that night said he was never the same. And sometimes, late at night, when the air was still and the world was quiet, he swore he could hear the drums. Story number 3. The Curse of the Bell Witch. The Bell family never wanted fame. They never sought out legends. But in the year 1817, something ancient, something vengeful, something unseen arrived at their farm in Adams, Tennessee. And what happened next would go on to terrify generations. This is the true story of the Bell Witch, the most famous haunting in American history. John Bell was a respected farmer, a hard-working man with a loving wife and children. The Bell farm was peaceful, a stretch of land filled with rolling fields and quiet forests. Until the night, something knocked on their door. It was late, the family settling in after a long day's work. And then a series of slow, deliberate knocks against the wooden walls of their home. John rushed outside, lantern in hand, but the porch was empty. The next night, it happened again. And then again. The knocking grew louder, closer, more demanding. Then came the whispers. At first, it was only at night, a low, unintelligible muttering, just beyond the edge of hearing. The family ignored it, until the whispers started saying their names. His youngest daughter, Betsy, suffered the worst. Invisible hands yanked her hair, left red handprints on her skin. At night, her blankets were torn away, and a voice deep, mocking would hiss in her ear, "You belong to me." The presence grew stronger. It could answer questions. It could sing hymns. It could speak in multiple voices at once. It claimed to be a spirit, an old, angry soul that had been disturbed by the Bell family's presence. It hated John Bell, and it wanted him dead. For years, the Bell family endured the torment. Priests, neighbors, even Andrew Jackson himself came to the Bell farm to investigate. No one could stop it. Then, on the morning of December 20, 1820, John Bell was found dead in his bed. Beside him, a small black vial filled with a strange liquid. The Bell Witch's laughter echoed through the house as the family tried to understand what had happened. A voice whispered from the shadows, "I did it." To test it, the remaining liquid was given to the family cat. It died instantly. John Bell was buried that week, and at his funeral, the witch sang a victory song, laughing between verses. After John's death, the witch's presence faded. The Bell family hoped they were free. But before disappearing, the voice made a final promise: "I will return in 7 years." And in 1828, 7 years later, it came back. The Bell Witch's legacy never faded. Strange happenings continued on the Bell property for decades. Even today, in Adams, Tennessee, there is a cave, the last known place, where the witch's presence lingers. Those who enter report hearing whispers, feeling unseen hands, and sometimes a voice laughing in the dark. So if you ever find yourself near the old Bell farm and you hear a knock at the door at midnight, do not open it, because the witch never truly left. Sleep well if you can. If tonight's story sent chills down your spine, make sure to subscribe to Fears Forged and hit the bell icon so you never miss another nightmare. See you in the next story. If the Bell Witch doesn't find you first,